Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theory of Anything podcast, episode 81.
Yes.
I am your host, Devon, and I have my two co-hosts with me, Ford. Hello, Ford.
Hello.
And Dad
Hello
/Paps
there.
/Andy.
Thank you. Included all three
Yep.
names.
Yep.
There might be others that I'm not aware of, but
Yeah, what people call you behind your back is
yes,
maybe you don't
indeed.
want to know about it.
Yeah, indeed. I'd rather not know.
Yeah. How are you both doing?
I'm doing all right, thank you. I've just wolfed down my tea to try and get to the microphone as quickly as possible. Nice plate of fish and chips with curry sauce, which is very enjoyable.
Very good.
As I'm self-catering today because my wife's doing childminding.
Oh no.
For grandchildren, I will add. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ford, how are you doing?
I haven't eaten yet, but I am planning on having this chickeny noodly thing. It's a little spicy. It's quite nice. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
A little spicy chicken noodly thing.
Yeah.
We should do a food podcast, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I had a burger and some chicken, some sweet potato fries. So there you go.
Good.
Yes.
Burger and chicken.
Yeah. It was a chorizo
Wow.
burger with some chicken wings
Okay.
and sweet potato fries. Yeah, very nice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not that keen on sweet potato fries, though, I must admit.
Really?
The rest of it sounds good. No, I just don't like sweet potato very much.
Oh, I prefer them with a regular potato, really.
Oh.
Cool. Well, now I've got that over.
The important stuff.
Yeah. Today's episode is a review episode, as you're probably aware by reading the title. We are going a little bit spiritual, as the podcast is supposed to be a little bit spiritual every now and then, as obviously our faith permeates.
Well done, thank you.
Everything that we do.
I was hoping you'd use that word.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
It permeates everything, but doesn't often get a look in. No, it does.
Well,
It doesn't get a great. We try and balance everything. So.
exactly. Yeah.
But today is a very spiritual episode.
Yeah. So I do want to see, obviously, if you're as so inclined, then it may be a little bit more, I don't know, up your alley. But if not, then maybe you can still listen along and get quite a lot out of it, because it is literature at the end of the day, and it's available for everyone, and it is, in my opinion, relevant to everybody.
Very good.
So, and I think we should probably just jump straight in.
And now it's time for book assignment chatting.
Yeah. Plus, it's probably a story that people, even if you're not a regular churchgoer or a spiritual person at all in any way, most people will have heard of this story, won't they?
Yes, exactly.
And the beauty of it is, as I think you're about to tell us, it's quite quick to read. So,
it is very quick to read.
Yeah.
So today we are planning on reading the whole thing. It's only 4 chapters. When you think of a whole book of the Bible, it sounds like a big deal, but I think it only takes about 10 minutes to read the entire thing. So maybe we'll do chapter by chapter and have a little say in here and there. We can butt in if we want. Relaxed atmosphere, and we'll see how we go. I do think, just a quick note based on what you just said. Now, even if you've not really been in the church or that much or whatever, you might still know the book of Jonah. I think that can also downplay the book in a certain sense, that the book of Jonah is one of those stories that's read to children. Like, there's this guy who got swallowed by a fish. Isn't that cool? Being inside a fish, the end. And it's like, well, what was actually the meaning behind this book? So hopefully we can delve into that a little bit more.
Good.
Yeah, that is it. Right, shall we jump in?
Yes, please.
Who's going to read first then?
All right. Okay. So we're going to read a chapter at a time. There's only 4, as Devon just said. Ford, you're saying you'd rather not do reading? Is that okay?
We can do 2 each if you want me and you, and we
all
can
right.
alternate.
All right.
I don't mind if I go first or not. It's up to you.
You kick us off then, and I'll pick up.
It starts with a spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
Jonah runs from the Lord is the header.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, just mention what version of the Bible we're reading.
Yes, so we're going to read. If you want to read along at home, then please feel free. We're reading from the New Living Translation. This is just what I've always read, really. So it's what I went with, and I think you read it in this as well, Dad. Is that correct? Other versions are available. So in chapter 1, the Lord gave this message to Jonah, the son of Amittai. Bad start.
I think so. Yeah. There we go. We've started already with the difficult names. Yeah.
Bad start.
Amittai.
Amittai. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh, announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are. But Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket and went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted out to their gods for help and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. But all this time Jonah was sound asleep down in the hold. So the captain went down after him. "How can you sleep at a time like this?" he shouted. "Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives." Then the crew cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods and caused a terrible storm. When they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. "Why has this awful storm come down on us?" they demanded. "Who are you? What is your line of work? What country are you from? What is your nationality?" Jonah answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land." The sailors were terrified when they heard this, for he had already told them he was running away from the Lord. "Oh, why did you do it?" they groaned. And since the storm was getting worse all the time, they asked him, "What should we do to you to stop this storm?" "Throw me into the sea," Jonah said, "and it will become calm again. I know that this terrible storm is all my fault." Instead, the sailors rowed even harder to get the ship to land, but the stormy sea was too violent for them, and they couldn't make it. Then they cried out to the Lord, Jonah's God. "O Lord," they pleaded, "don't make us die for this man's sin, and don't hold us responsible for his death. O Lord, you have sent the storm upon him for your own good reasons." Then the sailors picked Jonah up and threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. The sailors were awestruck by the Lord's great power, and they offered him a sacrifice and vowed to serve him. Now the Lord had arranged for a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. That's the end of chapter 1.
Very good. So we're going to have a little chit chat about that now, are we?
Yeah.
Set the scene well, and we're already with Jonah now inside the belly of the great fish.
Yes, it's surprising how quick it goes, isn't it?
It is.
All in one chapter, you've introduced the guy, and now he's in the belly of a fish.
Yeah. First thoughts, anything? Come on then, Ford. Let's hear what you've got to say about what we've just heard.
Yeah, come on.
Just FYI, I think it's really quite handy to get a study Bible, because at the beginning of every book, generally, you can get a little preamble, a bit of context. Yeah. And I think that's extremely useful, because you might not have any idea who Nineveh is or why Jonah's running from them and all this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's really handy. So for context, Nineveh is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And at this point in time, the Assyrians are dominating the area.
Yeah.
And as far as I understand it, this far back in history, even the big boys couldn't hold on to all the territory. So when we read in the Bible that the Assyrians oppressed the Israelites, and we still see them sort of operating as their own nation, it's because the empires would strike out, sort of take what they want, go home. Basically, they just couldn't or wouldn't hold on to all the empires. They'd keep the goods, basically. Not to say they weren't vassal states or something. History's complicated, I don't know. Now, the Assyrians were particularly brutal about this sort of process, that they would impale and flay people, and it's pretty nasty. So you can kind of understand why a guy who's had all that going on to presumably his family and friends, why he wouldn't be that interested in helping them.
Yeah, exactly. Or go into the capital at all.
Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah, why would you want to go to the capital of those people? Yeah,
it'd be like a Republican going to help a Democrat, wouldn't it?
It would.
If the Democrats flayed the Republicans.
We don't do politics. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
No.
Yeah, or the opposite way round. It could be the opposite way round. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Carry on. Good background though. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a bit of historical context.
Yeah, because his initial response seems a bit out there, really, isn't it? A bit extreme to be asked to go and do this great thing, go and tell the people of Nineveh, get up and go to the great city of Nineveh, announce my judgment against it because I have seen how wicked his people are. But his immediate response is to go the opposite direction, completely opposite way. Now, we must say also, I think, that Jonah was a prophet of God, but this book has very little prophecy in it other than that you know, we'll see in a moment when we get to the next bit what he does in Nineveh. But it's literally a 5-word sermon he delivers. You know, it's not a great big delivery of what he's got to go and tell them. But he won't even go and do that. I don't. Yeah, we'll cut to the chase later. But that immediate response of his was to flee God and go in the opposite direction. He knew God very well. He was a great man of God, and I think there's other. We haven't got time to go into it, but other encounters with Jonah in the Bible. But is an interesting character. Let's just say that. Yeah.
It's something that occurred to me earlier while I was thinking about this, is that I've never heard it mentioned before, and maybe that's because I'm just reading it into the text rather than it actually being true. But why is Jonah going away? I was wondering, like, Jonah's a prophet of Israel, or etc. You know, presumably, if he wanted to ignore God, he could just stay where he was.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that maybe it's that he's burying what he knows he needs to do under a layer of missionary work or something.
Yeah.
Is he going to Tarshish so that he can feel holy? Like, I'm this is kind of what God wanted.
Maybe. Yeah.
You know, God wanted me to go and preach to some heathens. I'll go to preach to some heathens. You know, okay, it's not the right heathens, but still.
Somewhere else, yeah.
I was thinking, can you extrapolate that kind of attitude into our day-to-day lives? Probably. I think we often kind of do what we think we need to do, but it's not necessarily the thing.
That look busy thing, you know? Yeah, maybe. Keep your head down and look busy.
But it's like sometimes there's a real conversation that needs to be had between you and someone, and you really don't want to do it. So you kind of do something like it. You go and talk to someone else. You make comment on other people's relationships or something like that. I don't know. It's hard for me maybe necessarily to know whether I'm supposed to extract these things from the text or not. But yeah.
No, I think there's something to that probably. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Anything else on this first chapter? Sorry, I shouldn't be leading. You're the one who's leading this.
If you guys knew anything about the casting lots.
Yeah.
There's not really much. I tried to look into this. There's not really much saying exactly what that means, but it could be anything like rolling dice or comparing sticks and stones to see who is the one that the situation is about. They used to use it for a lot of gambling as well, like casting lots for gambling. In the Old Testament, casting lots is mentioned 70 times, and the New Testament mentioned 7 times. Basically, I saw a commentary. I don't know how much you want to read into this commentary, but an idea was that because the casting lots actually in this case worked, the lots indicated correctly who it was who was at fault. And before the Pentecost, before the Holy Spirit resided in God followers, they used these lots to communicate and to understand God's will. Whereas now, obviously, that's not necessary because we have the Holy Spirit inside us, guiding us, basically.
That's interesting.
So I found it very interesting. Like, when they said, they cast lots to find out who it was, and it actually ends up being correct. It's like, I thought it was going to be like a heathen thing, but it's actually...
God used it still.
True.
Yeah. Maybe that was a genuine way of interacting with God, seeking, like you say, what God's guidance was. Because it said the crew cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods. So they were spiritual crew, but they were pagan, weren't they? They weren't.
Exactly. They all had their own gods.
Yeah. Which later on also is an interesting part of it, that these heathens, these pagans, were so impacted by this whole encounter with Jonah that they worship the one true God in the end, after they throw Jonah off the boat.
Yep.
And they repent, don't they? They say that, and it says the sailors were awestruck by the Lord's great power, and they offered him a sacrifice and vowed to serve him.
Yeah.
So in other words, they turned away from their false idols and were converted. So that's interesting, even though they'd just killed the anointed one of God.
I thought it was a little funny. Well, the way I imagine it anyway, in chapter 1, verse 8, where we have the sailors ask Jonah, what's the deal, basically? Like, why is this happening? Kind of asking, like, well, it comes on to him saying, whose God he worships. And it's like, probably expecting him to say something like the God of pottery or something like that. I worship the God of pottery. And then Jonah turns around and says, I worship Yahweh, the God of heaven, who made the lands and the seas. They're probably thinking, Why are you basically
Why are
annoying
you
them?
running away from that guy? Like, that guy sounds pretty cool.
Like, you told us earlier that you're running from your god, but now you've turned out to say that he's the god who made the universe, basically.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Did you
Where
really think
can-
that? How do you think that was going to work out?
Where can you flee from
Yeah.
him? Yeah.
Oh, why did you do it? Yeah.
That's right. They are full of questions, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant to count how many questions they have for him, but it's why did you do it?
How can you sleep at a time like this?
I thought that was interesting.
It's one question after another.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there's any particular significance to the fact that
I thought
Jonah's
it was-
asleep
Yeah.
while the danger's brewing around him?
Because this happens as well in the New Testament.
Absolutely.
I believe obviously you may recollect with Jesus in the storm,
Yeah.
sleeping.
In the bottom of the boat. Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't look for the text to be there again, but I'm sure it's like similar wording, like how can you sleep at a time like this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
That's
not
strange.
only is he running from the job he knows he needs to be doing, but he's also asleep to the forces that are crushing on him. You know,
Yeah.
I think if you were to try and pick apart little narrative chunks of wisdom from this, you'd kind of see that you basically can't be blinded. You can't run. You can't hide from things that need to be done.
Indeed.
Yep.
That's another level of hiding, wasn't it? It's like burying his head in his arms, going to sleep when he knows all around him is chaos because of him and because of his attempt to escape God.
Yep.
It's just like an ostrich burying its head in the sand almost.
Yeah.
Wishing the rest of the world would just go away,
Yeah.
leave me alone. Interesting. No, that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned it because that hadn't occurred to me. There's another correlation with something that Jesus does later on, but that's an interesting one there. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Anything else from chapter 1? Anyone wants to point out?
I did have something for the fish, but the next chapter deals a bit more of that. So maybe we'll
Let's jump on to chapter 2 then.
All right.
If you don't mind.
Shall I go ahead and read that then? Chapter 2.
Go for it.
It's headed Jonah's Prayer, chapter 2. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, from inside the fish. He said, I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the world of the dead, and Lord, you heard me. You threw me into the ocean depths, and I sank down to the heart of the sea. I was buried beneath your wild and stormy waves. Then I said, O Lord, you have driven me from your presence. How will I ever again see your holy temple? I sank beneath the waves, and death was very near. The waters closed in around me, and the seaweed wrapped itself around my head. I sank down to the very roots of the mountains. I was locked out of life and imprisoned in the land of the dead. But you, O Lord, my God, have snatched me from the yawning jaws of death. When I had lost all hope, I turned my thoughts once more to the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. Those who worship false gods turn their backs on all God's mercies. But I will offer sacrifices to you with songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows, for my salvation comes from the Lord alone. Then the Lord ordered the fish to spit up Jonah on the beach, and it did. That's the end of chapter 2. Most basically the whole of his prayer, virtually, isn't it?
It's giving thanks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really?
It's quite a good prayer, I think.
Yeah. Even though
You would think-
he's giving thanks for being in the belly of a fish,
Hmm.
really, for being saved.
But he's lifting God, isn't he? He's not turning his back on God. He's crying out to him. He's recognizing his situation, his circumstances. He's detailing that in quite some detail. But then he's like, it's a prayer of worship as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Towards the end there.
Yeah.
For very end, for my salvation comes from the Lord alone. Yeah.
I wanted to make comment briefly, if I can, on the whole the problem the average Joe probably has with this whole book is the fact that, you know, Jonah survives 3 days in a belly of a whale. That's impossible, etc.
Yeah.
And obviously, one, we can say, well, God can do whatever he likes, so
Yeah.
Who cares? But two, we obviously get a reference to this in the future from Jesus, and he parallels his death and resurrection to this section. And in this section, we see that he says about being taken down into Sheol, death. I think that was, what was the translation you had?
Translation.
The land of the dead. I'm thinking he's probably not actually alive in the belly. Is he actually dead? And when he's vommed back up at the other end, he's just being brought back to life by God.
Oh, this is controversial now.
That's an interesting thought. I've never considered that as a possibility, but you could be onto something.
Yeah, I don't know if that actually helps those who are a bit too pragmatically minded, but still.
Well, is it any more or less a miracle that somebody could be dead in the belly of a great fish? We translate that as a whale, don't we? It certainly is for the children's Bibles. You know, you imagine this great big cavernous room inside of a big whale, which isn't actually a fish, it's a mammal. But beside the point. But inside any creature like that, I think survival could be very difficult, couldn't it? That would be a miracle to survive that.
Yeah.
As much as it would be to die in the fish and then be brought back to life when you're coughed up on the shore.
Yeah.
Either way, God's intervening, isn't he?
Yeah. I know there's a lot of pictorial, thematic kind of things about the depths, the sea, being like hell.
Yeah.
In previous books, all over the Bible, in fact.
Absolutely.
So the fact that he's being dragged down down into the sea is partially pictorially, you know, him going to hell anyway, and then he's in the belly of a whale, and he says in this prayer that, you know, he's praying it from, you know, the land of the dead.
Well, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, go on, finish your point. Sorry,
it's hard to know what's pictorial in his prayer and in description, or what is, you know, he's being literal about. But I just thought that was a little interesting and probably worth saying.
Bit controversial, but you could have a point. I found the line you mentioned. You were asking for. I was locked out of life and imprisoned in the land of the dead.
Right.
Do we have a different translation that we could see how that line is?
What verse?
It's verse 6 in chapter 2. Do you have a different? What does the NIV, New International Version?
NIV says, "To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit."
Brought my life up from the pit sounds a bit like being raised from the dead. Yeah, I don't need it to, like I say, God can do, like, if God wanted someone to be surviving in a belly, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know,
either way, it's miraculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an intervention by God. Yeah, one way or the other. But it might help people to understand it better. Yeah,
very good.
Anything
more on this chapter?
Don't think anything from me about that. Although it's a powerful prayer, it's one of there's more interesting things to say further on, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Right, jumping on then.
I'm going to want to refer back to this, but yes, in the future.
Okay, I'll jump on to chapter 3 then. Titled "Jonah Goes to Nineveh." Another spoiler. Then the Lord spoke to Jonah a second time. "Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh and deliver the message I have given you." This time Jonah obeyed the Lord's command and went to Nineveh, a city so large that it took 3 days to see it all. On the day that Jonah entered the city, he shouted to the crowds, 40 days from now, Nineveh will be destroyed." The people of Nineveh believed God's message, and from the greatest to the least they declared a fast and put on burlap to show their sorrow. When the king of Nineveh heard what Jonah was saying, he stepped down from his throne and took off his royal robes. He dressed himself in burlap and sat on a heap of ashes. Then the king and his nobles sent this decree throughout the city: "No one, not even the animals from your herds and flocks, may eat or drink anything at all. People and animals alike must wear garments of mourning, and everyone must pray earnestly to God. They must turn from their evil ways and stop all their violence. Who can tell? Perhaps even yet God will change his mind and hold back his fierce anger from destroying us. When God saw what they had done and how they had put a stop to their evil ways, he changed his mind and did not carry out the destruction that he had threatened.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening here, isn't there?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, number one thing that I think most people have an issue with this chapter, correct me if I'm wrong, is God changed his mind.
Right.
That's quite a controversial thing. It happens a few
Right.
times in the Bible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, people don't seem to like God changing his mind as it tackles with issues of predeterminism and
Yes,
omniscience. But I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think God responds to prayer, doesn't he? And however you look at it, he's responding to their change. They've changed.
Yep.
And so now it doesn't mean that God didn't already know that they were going to change. But in order for them to change, this is what they had to be given this ultimatum.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to know that it wasn't 5-word sermon, it's an 8-word sermon, isn't it? 40 days from now, I suppose it depends what translation, Nineveh will be destroyed. And there's no mention in that. If that's all he shares with them, it's like, what we need something more to go on. What, by who, when, well,
Exactly,
we know in 40 days, but what we done,
How'd they know it's God's message? Like,
yeah, exactly.
the
Well,
right
it must be something about who it was coming from. Maybe word got out, or he travelled a day already through the city, hadn't he? It was a very big city, as it says. But the fact that there's no mention of God in that message that God gave him, yet when the king heard it, he knew exactly what he needed to do, and was obedient to do just that. And apparently, this king wasn't a very nice fellow, was he? What was his name again? It just says the king of Nineveh. There is a name for him somewhere. I forgot where I read that. But the king responds anyway to this very brief message.
Yeah, quite a significant response as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Even the animals,
herds and flocks.
Yeah.
May not eat or drink anything and wear garments of mournings. What mourning? So you're throwing garments of mourning over the cows and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder, because we often see in the Bible reference to Ashra poles. Ashra is the native god of Assyria. But I'm wondering, I haven't looked into this, whether the Ashra goddess was more of a hedonistic type, do whatever you want sort of thing. And that explains why these people were so, evil. And whether they'd ever heard a message like this, God will actually stop you. God will condemn you at a point,
Yeah, accountability.
And accountability, basically. Is that why there was such a pronounced sort of overt reaction to this?
Well, it says, doesn't it, right at the very beginning of this book, in our first few verses, but chapter 1, verse 2, announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are. So, definitely, there must have been some well-renowned stuff going on there that did not please God.
Yeah, because I see what you mean. Like, you usually think, obviously, people know that they're being evil, but maybe they're thinking that they're just following what their God wants them to do. If it's, as I say, very hedonist, their God is hedonist, then maybe they've not really thought before about taking responsibility and accountability for their actions like that. Because it's a big reaction to the message.
It is incredible.
I personally have got to assume there's probably a bit more to his message than that. Maybe we're just getting the Cliff Note version.
Okay.
But maybe that brief 8 words you said?
Yeah.
Was enough. I'd be surprised, but fine.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's any book that you could make longer with the really important message that it's been building up to, then you could have just added a few more words on. Surely, I mean, we could
True.
make the book a little bit bigger.
His prayer whilst in the fish is certainly wordy enough, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, a whole chapter for a prayer.
The message that changes a whole city is literally just one liner.
Yeah,
and
half a verse.
Good point.
I think there's obviously, as he's travelling through the city, this isn't just a shout it once when I get there. It's his gathering, I'm sure, some attention all the way through, shouting this message.
It says it took him 3 days, didn't it?
Well,
Yeah,
it says it would take 3 days to see it all, but on the
Yeah.
first day that he entered the city,
So it's a third of the way through, yeah.
yeah,
Not
on
even
the
in
day
middle
Jonah
of
entered the city, he shouted to crowds. So, yeah.
I just picture that he'd be carrying all the way through that third distance through the city. He would have been calling this out all the way, and so word probably went ahead of him that there's this. Who's this? Who's coming? And the message must have got to the king very quickly.
Yeah, I mean that's their job, isn't it? It's prophet's job.
Yeah,
and spreading these messages is what they do.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
Okay.
one thing he probably didn't have to carry many notes, did he? He could just
Yeah, you can memorize it.
very easily memorize that sermon.
Yeah.
Very good. Anything else on that?
Yeah, I mean, it didn't say where he got the 40 days from either, because that wasn't in the original message.
No,
So
no, that's
maybe
just
there's
him, isn't
additional conversation between him and God. I don't know, but
yeah,
that we don't have.
Yeah, we don't know what we haven't got here, do we?
Yeah,
But we
exactly.
only know what we have got. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything
okay.
else for this chapter? Anyone?
It did the job, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah. And so the same response, the whole city ends up committing itself to the one true God, if I can put it that way. Or how did
the
Jonah
Lord
call him? The Lord, yeah. As did all the crew of the ship that he was
or Yahweh
expelled from. Yeah. So there's a lot going on here in terms of people encountering God and having a life-changing experience. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Chapter
So
4 then, please.
Me to read, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Headed Jonah's anger at the Lord's mercy. Chapter 4. This change of plans upset Jonah, and he became very angry. So he complained to the Lord about it. Didn't I say before I left home that you would do this, Lord? That is why I ran away to Tarshish. I knew that you were a gracious and compassionate God, slow to get angry and filled with unfailing love. I knew how easily you could cancel your plans for destroying these people. Just kill me now, Lord. I'd rather be dead than alive because nothing I predicted is going to happen. The Lord replied, Is it right for you to be angry about this? Then Jonah went out to the east side of the city and made a shelter to sit under as he waited to see if anything would happen to the city. And the Lord God arranged for a leafy plant to grow there, and soon it spread its broad leaves over Jonah's head, shading him from the sun. This eased some of his discomfort, and Jonah was very grateful for the plant. But God also prepared a worm. The next morning, at dawn, the worm ate through the stem of the plant, so that it soon died and withered away, and the sun grew hot. God sent a scorching east wind to blow on Jonah. The sun beat down on his head until he grew faint and wished to die. Death is certainly better than this, he exclaimed. Then God said to Jonah, Is it right for you to be angry because the plant died? Yes, Jonah retorted, even angry enough to die. Then the Lord said, You feel sorry about the plant, though you did nothing to put it there, and a plant is only at best short-lived. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention all animals. Should I feel sorry for such a great city? And that's the end of the book of Jonah.
Wow.
And we don't even get his reply, do we? He asks the question and leaves us hanging.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't know if he turns around and comes to his senses, or
Yeah. Oh, well, we're talking just now about what we don't have in the book of Jonah is almost as interesting as what we do have. Yeah.
I personally like to think that Jonah took note of the lesson and got back on the horse because, well, the reason I say that is because the story is written down. if we're to take it as a historical account, which I think most people should and do, then he's got it.
Yeah.
He put that book into the Bible.
Yeah.
That's my take on that.
Very good.
Yeah. Or he still was of the attitude that Nineveh should have been destroyed. And right, we're done anyway.
Yeah. It's an interesting reaction, isn't it? We see in chapter 4.
It is. Yeah.
He's not a happy man.
I wonder two things. Is he embarrassed?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Carry on. That's my immediate thought. But
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it not sort of fly in the face of the prayer he did earlier?
Yeah.
He's obviously realized his fault and realized he needs grace, and then he doesn't see any grace for other people. I think this book does a real inversion of the norms, as you probably imagine them, because the pagan sailors they're the ones with their eyes and minds open to Yahweh, and the Ninevites, they hear and understand,
Yeah.
All the while, the prophet, the assumed hero, the righteous one, is blind to God's love, and grace.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. That's very much, I think, a big part of why this book is here.
I like the rhetorical questions. It seems like very often when you get a lesson learning time from the Lord, he does it in rhetorical questions. Is it right for you to be angry about this? It's like, well, you know the answer. And like, shouldn't I feel sorry enough for such a great city?
Yeah.
So that's how it ends. The rhetorical question. Like, of course, 120,000 people more important than this little plant that he's so angry about.
Yeah, because he asks the same question about the people in Nineveh, doesn't he? In verse 4 of chapter 4. And again, he asks it of the plant, doesn't he? In verse 9.
Is it right for you to be angry because the plant died?
Is it right for you to be angry that the people lived? Or, I mean, it sounds like he sat up on the hill waiting for this amazing destruction of this awful city to happen, and because it doesn't happen, he's embarrassed, isn't he? I think because what he said didn't come true. They'll be destroyed in 40 days. And we don't have a time frame of any of this really, but
no, but you could just waltz back into the city and say, "The Lord your God has heard your cries, and you've been saved." Like happy days, party time, It's all good.
He could be the new senior pastor of the Church of Nineveh.
He could, capitalize on this opportunity.
Yeah, start a whole new Christian foundation.
But his response is very interesting. Like I want to die. I'm just going to lie here under a plant, and then it's just very, very curious behaviour from this guy.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. He's an odd character, isn't he?
Yeah.
I will mention now, I think it's a good time, that there's if you were to go onto YouTube and type in the book of Jonah, you will get, I think your first response will be something from quickly find it. We're going to put a link in it's from the Bible Project. Now, the Bible Project is an organization that have a great YouTube channel, and they've done really very well animated summaries of each of the books in the Bible, and the Jonah one is particularly worthwhile listening to. Why did I get to all this? We're going to put the link in anyway for anybody who wants to have a look at that. If this has intrigued you a bit more, there's a lot more detail in that. Some of the stuff we've referred to already, but there's other stuff that's said on that 9-minute video, an overview. But there's a reason why I mention that now. If you were to watch that video, the commentator within that video, he mentions, although he's a prophet of God, and this book is in the Bible amongst the minor prophets, that doesn't mean that they're the less important prophets. They are the shorter books of the Bible. That's why we're looking at it, obviously. This is a man of God, a prophet of God, who must have been at least well thought of by some anyway. But his responses are so away from where we think we would, as a Christian anyway, or a person of faith. Respond. We'd be delighted, wouldn't we, if a city was saved, turned around from its evil ways.
It's like he's annoyed with the merciful and compassionate,
the mercy,
unfailing love, characteristics of God. It's like, why does that annoy you? Those characteristics.
And yet he acknowledges them in his own life. That's how come he came out the belly of the fish.
It's hypocritical, surely.
Yeah.
I think in those days, you'd have a sort of a terrestrial god, like your city, your nation would have a god, and you'd imagine your god against their god, and basically drawing out the picture of my city versus their city.
Yeah.
And I think probably Jonah's just stuck into that mindset that actually there's no resolution here. My god will kill your gods, and my god will kill your city, and that's all that there can be.
Yeah.
I think this is quite a revelationary moment that we see actually, no, God is actually for the Gentiles as well. And it's well before its time. If we think of that as a New Testament idea, then that's quite impressive.
It is, yeah.
And people say that there's some sort of irreconcilable conflict between mean Old Testament God and the new loving, peaceful mankind New Testament God. But I think those people just haven't really got their eyes open to all the facets of God's nature in both New and Old Testament. Because there's lots of times in the Old where he is, this.
Not
compassionate.
Sorry, yeah. I see what you mean,
Indeed. And on the reverse side, also, this is another topic, but in the New Testament, he does do a bit of smiting. If you look at Revelation and even in Acts, there's a bit of But that's a whole other thing. But God's multifaceted. He can love our enemies, as much as we hate that sometimes.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what do you think the message of this book is for us today? Any thoughts on that?
Personally, I think there's a lot of lessons you can draw out of this, at almost every stage, as with most books in the Bible, to be fair.
Yeah.
But what Devon said earlier about the way that God just sort of asks rhetorical questions, it reminds me a lot of the end of Job. And the way Job just ends, with God basically just doing a mic drop where he just asks questions.
Yeah. Mic drop, I like that. I do that. Yeah, I do. Yes. Yeah.
The book just ends with God just making a rhetorical point.
Yeah.
I couldn't say what the main message from the book is, apart from.
What about? Yeah. Here's a question. Unless Ford's got any. No, sorry, Devon's got anything.
Well, it's
in response to that question.
No, go for it.
No, it's okay. Does it speak to our attitudes to people who are not like us?
Yeah.
There's something about that in this for us today.
There is a holy downness about Jonah and the way that the ancillary characters are all heathens, but they get it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't.
Is there something of a warning for us to only be caring towards those who are like us?
Yeah.
I think I don't think that's the predominant feeling amongst the Christian church. I think the Christian church is pretty good at reaching out to those who are not like them, but there's also that little bit of, we look after our own, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's human nature, isn't it, really?
Yeah, exactly. And it goes against human nature to not be that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as Christians, we should be striving to, we exist for the people who don't belong to us yet, the mission of the church, isn't it? Is to be there for the people who aren't like us. But we can get caught up in the mechanics of being a church body and only doing what we do for the people who are with us, and taking our eye off the ball, that there's a big wide world out there that isn't very clean and nice and pretty, that actually needs something of God in its understanding.
Yeah.
That's something that I just wonder, what's our attitude towards people who are not like us? Can we be guilty of being a bit like Jonah? I hope not, but maybe we are a bit.
Yeah, I think we can as well. It's also an element of entitlement as well, because obviously he's got the status. He's supposed to be the closest to God, so when God saves him, that's fine, and he's entitled to that. Really, he's like, "Oh, thank you, God, for saving me. Happy days, move on."
Yeah.
But when God saves someone else, it's like, "Oh no, that's not right. I'm the one who's the official church person, or whatever it is. I'm the prophet. So how come you're hearing from God? How come God's smiling on you?
Yeah,
that's not fair."
To that point, it's always easier to see people as worse than us. I mean, you can see people that are better than us as well, but we don't like that so much. We like to look down on people.
At least I'm not that person.
Yeah. And then
and
then like Devon says, when things when things go well for them, we're annoyed, and when things go badly for them, there's a bit of us that actually thinks, yes, they deserve that.
Yeah, there you go.
And
That's God's judgment. Yeah,
yeah, and that's what Jonah wanted, wasn't it?
yeah.
He wanted to see justice served, but not against me, against them. Yeah.
So it's very easy for us to be quite critical of Jonah, but it's very easy for us to not see him in each of us as well if we're not careful. Yeah. But also it shows us what we I just said all that to say there's a warning here to not be like Jonah, but it also reaffirms to us that God is the person that we read about in the New Testament throughout. And you referred, who was it who said something earlier about, we think of all the stuff that God does in the Old Testament as bad. A lot of the worst stuff that happens in the Bible has got in the Old Testament. It isn't even the doing of God; it's the doing of people. Doing what people do to other people. And because it's in the Bible, we think it must be God doing it, but it's not. It's when people are away from God that the bad stuff happens. So, and often it's completely. You read it if you read it carefully. God is nowhere to be seen in those terrible situations. Not all in every case, but very often that's an interesting way of looking at it. Anything that you wrote down in your preparation that you feel we really need to say before we draw things to close? No, I'm not leading this session.
You're not reading
sorry
this session,
sorry Devon.
That's all right. I found it interesting. It's a very slight off thing in verse 7.
Chapter 4.
Yeah, so obviously God's just given him a plant to ease his discomfort, and Jonah's grateful. But then he arranges for a worm to eat the plant. And this is just like a little play backwards and forwards to kind of I don't know. Is it to spark conversation or is it to I don't
bring him to his knees a bit?
Yeah. He could just not give him anything at all then.
That makes me think of, I'm assuming here, but his attitude toward this miracle plant, is it something like a relic? It's like, oh, this is a holy thing. This is more important. This is the most important thing. It's from God. And then God obviously counters that to his attitude toward people. And I wonder if it's the idea that, us as religious people, we care about the holy thing rather than the people thing. I don't know if that has any basis, but it just occurred to me.
You've got some good insights, I think. You could have something there as well.
Because you'd think, actually, if he wants some shade, he'd be able to find like a little rock or something, or I don't know, something around that would give him some shade.
Well, it does say he made himself a shelter. No, what does it say? It mentions the word shelter. Jonah went out to the east side of the city and made a shelter to sit under as he waited to see if anything would happen to the city.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
So it can't only be about the shade, then, can it?
No, that's right. Yeah.
So maybe it is God has provided this thing, so it is a holy thing. So this eased my discomfort in that regard.
Yeah.
Because I think we can all get very caught up in the righteous way to do things, the sacrament, and I think rightly so. But also we have to remember the people.
Yeah. Exactly. So how much more the people are.
Yeah. So that's a possible lesson out of that. I don't know if it resonates with many people, but
well done.
Anything else from anybody?
I just encourage people to watch that video, and then if anybody wants to, we may have comebacks on this and have a little chat more on another episode about anything that we felt we ought to have mentioned.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to hear other people's thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Cool. What the Book of Jonah says to them.
Furthermore to that Bible Project video, if you like real deep dives on Bible in general, their podcast as well is really good.
Yeah.
And Devon, I believe you like the guy's Preachers, the guy who does that.
Yeah.
Tim something.
Oh gosh, what's his name? It is Tim somewhere.
Tim Mackey.
Tim Mackey, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, he does really good Preachers and his podcast. Yeah.
Okay, so you just do a search in your podcast platform for the Bible Project, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, very good.
Fabulous.
All right, well, thanks everyone for contributing. Thank you for future contributors and for bearing with us as we were reading through the whole book of a Bible together.
Wow,
I thought that was very
that's
interesting.
The first. Yeah.
I think we picked the right book to read.
Yeah,
in the podcast. Yeah, so that I really enjoyed that. That was really good.
Did we want to rate it?
Oh.
Would that be heresy?
Yeah. Rate the book in the Bible, yeah.
It's got to be 10 out of 10, surely.
Oh, yes.
How many days and nights in
the
the
belly of
in the
a
belly
fish.
of a big fish
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
10?
Very, very good.
I think there's so much in there. I'd rate it highly. If you're going to read a book in the Bible, then that's a great one to have a look at. It might confuse, but if you delve deep, you can really see some stuff there that's worthwhile. And hopefully, our conversation today, whenever you're listening, has been a help to assist with that.
I think it highlights very quickly and briefly a broad spectrum of human behaviour between the ancillary, as Ford put it, ancillary characters and Jonah, and also the character of God. A few of the characteristics of God, which in the Old Testament they say is very, very cool to see. So I'd definitely rate it high as well. In a very, very brief manner. I'd wish it was a little bit longer, but we want a bit more detail sometimes. But it got the message across, I think.
If it was longer, we wouldn't have read it though. So that's
that's true. Yeah.
That's right. Very good. Well, I think we just give it full house of points, then, shall we? All of us.
Full house. Wow.
Oh, you fault it on not being long enough. Okay.
Yeah. I'll give it a 9.
Deserve a 10. 9. Yeah.
Could have been longer.
Yeah. Longer.
Excellent.
What about you, Ford?
I know God is gracious, and we just learned that, but I don't want to tempt things, so I'll just give it a 10 out of 10. So
Just to be on the safe side.
I'll go critique anything going on it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll
go in the middle 9.5.
There you go. Good. Good. Don't make me feel bad. Excellent.
Devon's living life on the edge. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll pray for you.
Thanks.
Very good.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that.
Let's set your next assignment and say toodaloo.
Up next time, we have Paps' segment. Did you want to give us a teeny tiny brief?
Well, we're going to be having another bit of a deep dive into the subject of a word that came to, well, it's a word we all know, but it just had listen to a conversation over the Christmas period about nostalgia. And nostalgia features highly in many of our Christmases. So I wanted to have a little chat about that, if that's okay.
Very cool.
Just in time for Christmas.
Just in time. No, it's prompted by things that happen at Christmas, but not in time for Christmas.
Okay, good.
Let's hope we get around the microphone again before next
Christmas
December.
2025. Yeah. Excellent. Look forward to that one. And please do vote for the next assignment for us to re-review, I suppose. It's going to be a film, right?
Oh, good. I like the film ones.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. And then I guess I'll just wrap it up, shall I?
Do we have to tell them how to vote or what the film choices are that might lure people to go and vote? Go on.
Okay. You can vote from a link in the description. Takes you to a voting page. We can click what you want us to review. The films that we've got to choose from are Apocalypse Now, Hunger Games, and Tron, the original.
The original 1982 version of Tron, yeah? Ooh, yeah.
All fun films to watch, I'm sure. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that as well. Please review and thumbs up the podcast or wherever you're listening to. I think mostly it's YouTube these days. We get the most listens. So a thumbs up is very good. We're also on Twitter at Theory of Anything, TING at the end, or X, whatever you want to call it, Twitter or X. I don't know. Or you can email us at theoryofanything@hotmail.com.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
Or comment in the comments box as well. And that's it. And we're good to hear your feedback or your thoughts on what we've shared this episode at all.
Well done.
Yeah, and that's it from me.
Yeah. What do you say?
Do you want to say the thing?
No, you say it, don't you?
Oh yeah, I say that bit, don't I?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. That's it. See you in a bit.